If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 7 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that on June 9th, 2025, Israel and the US will bomb Iran's nuclear, energy, and weapons facilities. This will likely occur in the US time zones on June 8th. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. It is predicted that on August 6th, 2025, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River for over 100 years will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls. The reason for this is that Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism, and the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, symbolic of Noah's Ark. Niagara in the native language means straight, narrow way, and Niagara's Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the CN Tower in downtown Toronto, because Toronto and its tower are symbolic of the Tower of Babel. In a game of horseshoes, the object is to aim the horseshoe and throw it at the metal stick, which is why the Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the metal stick that is the CN Tower. God is communicating that as testament for those who will live in the 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth, the geography of North America will, as a result of a massive earthquake, be divided by a body of water from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta. This destruction will be judgment on America and Canada for attempting to divide God's land, Israel. When this happens, the water in the Great Lakes will spill out over southern Ontario and Toronto. I am predicting that a solar flare will erupt on the surface of the sun and send a coronal mass ejection that will hit Earth on August 13th, 2025, which will knock out America's power grid and will lead to food shortages. The hit of the coronal mass ejection, predicted for August 13th, that will knock out the power grid will also knock many planes out of the sky. I am predicting that on August 30th, in the North America time zones, and on August 31st in the Asia time zones, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the east coast. The asteroid will also trigger a mega landslide on Hawaii Island that will trigger a mega tsunami that will hit the west coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the fifth trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029, and it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that Israel and the US will bomb Iran on June 9th. All right, and the information that I will explain in this video as to how this is known ahead of time will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. And that is the purpose of the prediction. That is from God. And I know far better than anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction. It is to prove the things that I'll be saying in this video. And it is through these things that the date 6/9 is known and the prediction is known. Okay, now we can see here that this email was composed on April 4th. So it's been known since at least April 4th that, as we can see here, okay, April 4th, if you are skeptical for some reason, email me and I'll forward this to you. Now we can see that the significance, therefore, of June 9th has been known since at least April 4th. The fact of the matter is that June 9th has been known to be an extremely important date that God is pointing to since about 2/3 of the way through 2024. Along the way, it was realized that June 9th would be the date that Israel would bomb Iran and the US bomb Iran. And so, let's get started here. On 4/4, the date 4/4, which hints at the 44th president, who is the second of the two antichrists. The headline is, and I'm speaking in the present tense because this was composed on April 4th, the headline was on this date that the stock market had its worst week since the pandemic. Okay, so God arranged it. It was a Friday. And so the headline was, stock market has its worst week since the pandemic. In terms of prophecy, the pandemic is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. Because the mark of the Antichrist was used brought out for the supposed purposes of countering the pandemic. The 44th president is the Antichrist who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, so that's one reason why we have this worst week since the pandemic sign on the date 4/4. G500 in the Greek concordance is the word Antichrist. On 4/4, as in the 44th president, the S&P 500 stock market index lost 322.44 points. It will be promised that the mark of the Antichrist will provide age reversal and rejuvenation and even immortality without the need for God. This transhumanism technology that is the mark of the Antichrist will promise this. This promise is symbolized by Revelation 3:22. God uses this in his signs. That's the reason for this loss in the stock market on the date 4/4, the worst week since the pandemic, of a loss of 322 points, 0.44. It hints at Genesis 3:22, which is symbolic of the first lie ever told, which was told to Eve in the garden by the serpent, that she shall surely not die. The big lie at the end of the age will be the same lie at the beginning of the age. The loss of 322.44 points hints at this. The 0.44 points hints at the Antichrist, the 44th president, who will lead the way in this lie of immortality through the mark of the Antichrist. This loss of 32.44 points on 4/4, the date, is 3 times 22 days before June 9th. What I was calling Revelation 9/11 day, for good reason. The predicted signs that will occur on this date will symbolize Revelation 9/11 day. In other words, now it is known that June 9th will not be Revelation 9/11 day, but instead be a step in the trail of signs that is leading to Revelation 9/11 day. You could call this day many other names as well, including Demons Day, Aliens Day, the Seven Thunders Day, and on and on. Fifth Trumpet Day. Now, Revelation 9/11 day, which is a term that I've made up to explain God's signs because that's what God is pointing to, will be a symbolic beginning of some sort to the promise of immortality through taking the mark of the Antichrist. That's why the 3 times 22 days connection from when the stock market lost 322 points, 0.44, on the date 4/4. It's truly astounding. Now, why is the prediction that Israel and the US bombing Iran on June 9th symbolic of Revelation 9/11 day? The reason that is the case is that the US will use its bunker buster bombs that will drill deep into the earth in Iran to bomb their underground nuclear weapons facilities and thereby explode and create massive pits in Iran. This is symbolic of the pit, the bottomless pit that will be opened in Revelation chapter 9, and this prophecy is symbolized by Revelation 9:11, which describes Apollyon, or Abaddon, the king of the underworld, or the bottomless pit, In other words, a name for Satan. And so that's why we have this astounding connection. What will happen on Revelation 9:11 day, which will be in the 4th month of 2029, will be the demons emerging from the bottomless pit and the demonic realm and crossing over when the door is opened to the bottomless pit to the earthly realm. Then they will pretend to be aliens and promise this technology that will promise age reversal and rejuvenation and immortality. At that time, it is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected and become the first of the two antichrists. Now, the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. It is a door that will open with a key, as it is described in Revelation 9, to the bottomless pit. The symbol for the Vatican is keys. That's why the Vatican's symbol is keys, is so that, or because it symbolizes this key that will open the bottomless pit, as described in Revelation chapter 9. When the Pope is resurrected by the aliens, he will announce that the aliens have made him the ambassador for the world. Okay. Now, that's the reason why I mentioned this 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is that's why the number 4 is symbolic of this door, this portal that the demons will open and pass through into the earthly realm. That's why another reason it is 322.44 points on the date 4/4. Because again, the demons will promise this immortality symbolized by Genesis 3:22, and it is through a door that they will pass through. Hence, 322 points, 0.44 points, and this date 4/4 is 3 times 22 days before June 9th, when the pits will be opened. The door, in other words, the symbolic door will be opened in Iran. Now, Iran is Persia, which hints at the prince of Persia in the book of Daniel, which is another name for Satan. And this description of the prince of Persia is in the demonic realm. And so, Iran, in other words, itself is symbolic of the demonic realm. And so that's why these pits will be opened in Iran, because it's symbolic of the pits the bottomless pit that will be opened in Revelation chapter 9. Now, the date 6/9 also hints at 6 divided by 9, which is 0.666, the number that is associated with the Antichrist and Satan in Bible prophecy. Also, the date 6/9 hints at the 6th through the 9th hour when Jesus was on the cross, when it was said that darkness came over the land. Well, when the bottomless pit is opened and the demons invade the earthly realm, darkness will be coming upon the land. So that's another reason why the date 6/9 is symbolic of this future date, which will be in the 4th month of 2029, because again, the number 4 is symbolic of this door that the demons will pass through. Now, so this connection of 3 times 22 days is also 66 days. 66 days after the S&P 500, and again, that hints at the word Antichrist in the Greek concordance, and the loss of 322.44 points on 4/4 is the date 6/9, and again, 6 divided by 9 is equal to 0.666. And so, in other words, we have a 66 days connection to this date that's symbolic of 666. This connection of 3 times 22 days from the loss of 322 points, 0.44 points on the date 4/4, is also 18.08% of a calendar year, which hints at H188, which is the word in the Hebrew concordance for woe exclamation mark, used in the context of extreme judgment from God in the Bible, including the fifth trumpet judgment in the book of Revelation, when the bottomless pit will be opened. That's amazing. And so we have three profound ways in which the stock market sign on 4-4 connects to the date 6-9. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. This connection of 3 times 22 days from the loss of 322.44 points on the date 4-4 is also 9 weeks and 3 days. So this is a fourth profound way in which this connection is prophetic. So 9 weeks and 3 days, this hints at the sun that is on average 93 million miles away from Earth. The predicted solar storm will cause a loss of power in the US, as in the loss in the stock market, right? The mark of the Antichrist that will promise immortality will be enforced through restrictions on buying and selling food that will be rationed after the solar storm, the predicted upcoming solar storm. The mark of the Antichrist gives a person blood disease. G131 in the Greek concordance is the word for blood disease. From the day of the news story about the stock market having its worst week since the pandemic, which is again symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which causes blood disease, it is 131 days to the predicted solar storm on August 13th that will cause a loss of power in the US. This connection of 131 days in between the loss on the date 4-4 and the predicted loss of power is also 4 months and 9 days. 4 divided by 9 is equal to 0.44. The stock market sign on 4-4 hinted at Genesis 3:22, and the coming lie regarding age reversal and immortality through the SHOTs, okay? Let's keep that word in mind, the SHOTs. I'll just repeat that. The stock market sign on 4-4 hinted at Genesis 3:22, as I have explained, right? The loss of 322.44 points. Now, JFK was the youngest ever president to be elected. He was shot in the head in a Ford Lincoln car. The 4 times 4th president, President Lincoln, was shot in the head in Ford Theater. And that's just one of many parallels between the assassination of JFK and Abraham Lincoln. All right, I'll repeat that. JFK was shot in the head in a Ford Lincoln. The 4th times 4th president, Lincoln, was shot in the head in Ford Theater. JFK was the first of 4 major political assassinations in the 1960s, right? After him was Malcolm X, RFK, his brother, and Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, so JFK was the first of 4 major political assassinations in the 1960s. Lincoln was the 4 times 4th president. Now, Lincoln was the first of 4 major political assassinations in the 1960s, which was the same decade as the height of popularity of the Lincoln Continental, the Ford Lincoln Continental, with its 4 suicide doors. Okay? So JFK was shot in the Lincoln Continental with its trademark famous Ford, 4, I should say. Oh, no kidding. No kidding. I didn't even realize that. Ford hints at 4. Wow. Wow. You just stumble upon these things when you're going through the information. It's just amazing. Wow. So the 4 times 4th president was shot in the Ford Theater because Ford hints at 4. Oh, obviously, right? Of course. And JFK was shot in a Ford Lincoln Continental with its 4 suicide doors. That's also a 4-4. It's not just 4 suicide doors, it's in a Ford, which gives us a 4-4. So if the 4 major political assassinations wasn't enough to pair with the 4 suicide doors that he was shot in, well, the Ford does. Okay. Wow. Now, okay. So, now, the nickname of these doors is the suicide doors, right? This is commonly known. The reason is because the 2 back doors open or hinged on the back side of the door. So in other words, they open outwards. If you could picture that. If you don't know the Ford Lincoln, if you can just picture that, right? And so this is symbolic of door because as I explained at the beginning, God is using the number 4 to symbolize the door through which the demons will pass through. And as I explained, the demons will be promising age reversal and immortality, etc., rejuvenation. And that's why JFK was the youngest, because God uses records and extremes for signs. That's why he was the youngest president and shot and died in the 4 suicide, between the 4 suicide doors in the Ford, and him being the first of 4 major political assassinations, which was the 1960s, which was the same decade as the height of popularity of the 4-door Lincoln Continental, Ford Lincoln Continental. Okay? Now, just to prove to you that God is using the symbolism in the suicide doors, exactly 2 times 3, well, exactly 60 years, which is 2 times 30 years. Because, okay, so JFK was the first of 4 major political assassinations in the 60s, the same decade as the popularity of the Lincoln Continental. And then 60 years exactly later was the car that crashed into the Rainbow border crossing between New York State and Canada. And if you recall that story, the car leaped into the air before it crashed and burned into a big fireball. And the governor of the state, after she saw the footage, the video footage of it, said that it was surreal. And you know what I just realized? Just what I just said a minute ago. You just come across these things when you go through the information. It was all about the video footage. What is the most famous video footage in all of history? I mean, literally. It's the assassination of JFK. That's a fact, right? It is the most famous, most watched video footage in all of history. Well, exactly 60 years later, we have the famous video footage because the car crash was about its video footage. And somehow the car took some kind of a ramp and shot into the air. And that's the SHOT symbolism. It shot into the air. Okay? And it was said at the time in the news stories, and the governor might have said it, but she did say it was surreal. I don't know if she said this, but it was thought that at first that this car crash was a suicide. Because why would that happen? Why would someone go at top speed toward the barrier, the border crossing barrier, if not to make a political statement of some kind, and then crash and burn and die, right? It was like someone who sets themselves on fire or something as a political statement, in a way. So whether or not it was actually a suicide and not a malfunction of the car, it doesn't matter. That's what was talked about after the crash. In other words, it was a suicide crash, and it was connected with exactly 60 years after this arguably most important event of the 1960s. Not even arguably. It is the most important event of the 1960s in America, for sure. It changed everything. It set off the summer of love and the baby boomer revolution and everything. That was going to happen anyway, but the JFK assassination was the spark that set off the tinder that was laid down already. Okay? So there you have it. Now, but the thing about the 60 years connection, by the way, the 60th word in the Greek concordance is the word mourn, as in M-O-U-R-N, which is exactly what happened after the nation's president was killed. Severe, deep mourning across the nation for many years, and still, really, to this day. So that's relevant too. But also, 60 is 2 times 30, and this is the key thing here. God pairs, and 2 times 30 hints at 23, and God pairs 23 and 44 in his signs to confirm the signs and connections. This is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming matters the Bible says is required. This is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. I know this because I have been studying his big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. And the reason for this is that the 44th president is the basketball president who wore jersey 23 in high school. 23 is also symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now, also 44 is symbolic of door. And so again, we had the Ford Lincoln with its 4 suicide doors and the SHOT of JFK, exactly 2 times 30, as in 23 years before the other suicide crash in a car. All right? Okay, you get the idea. Now, by the way, it just occurred to me another thing here. Wow. Where was the crash? It was at the Rainbow Bridge crossing. That's astounding. That's so obvious. I'm kind of a little bit upset that I didn't know this or recognize this before. It's different than the Ford. The Ford was kind of hidden, but I'm just realizing, wait a second. It was, at the time, it was obvious to me that it was border wall of security symbolism, as in a parallel with the book of Joshua, the walls of security of Jericho collapsing in God's judgment. But what's really going on here is this bridge, because the bridge is the same symbolism as the door in God's signs. The demons will cross the bridge from the demonic realm to the earthly realm. Same thing as opening the door or portal to the demonic realm. And so that's why this is so amazing. We have Lincoln who was shot, JFK who was shot. Oh, not only that, he was shot in the head. Let me just finish this first and I'll explain why that's relevant. But he was shot in the Ford, in between the 4 suicide doors, exactly 2 times 30 years, a pairing of 23 and 44 that confirms the signs and connections, before the suicide car crash at the bridge. And what is the rainbow symbolism for in the Bible? God's judgment. Oh, wow. So amazing. Wow. I didn't even recognize this till now. Okay. Now, so another thing is that JFK was shot in the head, just like the 4x4th president. That's because the demons crossing over into the earthly realm will not just be promising the immortality with the mark of the Antichrist, but after the people take the mark of the Antichrist, and by the way, the vast majority of people have already taken the mark of the Antichrist, and you know what I'm talking about. These people will be demonically possessed, and that will be facilitated through their brains, through their heads, which is why JFK was shot in the brain, and so was the 4x4th president. JFK was shot in the brain, the first of 4 major political assassinations in between the 4 suicide doors in the Ford Lincoln, because the 4 is symbolic of door, which is the same as a bridge, which is why the car crashed at the bridge. These demons will cross over, and then through brain waves, delta brain waves. Oh, wow. Wow, wait a second. Is delta the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet? It is. And of course it is. Because actually the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet, which is the symbol for a door, because the Hebrew letters are symbols for things, that letter is Dalat, which is where we get the word delta. Right? The origin of the word delta comes from the Semitic language and Dalat in the Hebrew alphabet. And they're both the 4th letters. But the reason why that is amazing beyond words and jaw-dropping for me at this moment is because it has been known for years now that it will be delta brain waves that will facilitate the demonic possession of people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. The technology that is in the mark of the Antichrist will make its way to people's brains and function as somewhat of a transistor, which will facilitate delta brainwaves, which is conducive for demonic possession. And I didn't know that delta, the letter delta, is the 4th letter until now, which totally matches this theme that God is demonstrating of the number 4 to hint at the coming door that will be opened to the demonic realm. Yeah. So, okay, so it just occurred to me, I was inspired to look online at the Rainbow Bridge and assuming that there would be some 4s involved. And not only was I correct, I was correct like 1,000% here. So the bridge has 4 lanes. All right. It's also Regional Road 400 and something. It's situated at the GPS coordinate of 40 something. But more than that, guess how much the bridge cost to construct? $4 million. That's right. It's the $4 million bridge, which is what I am saying is that the bridge is like a door, and the door is the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And so that's why the car crashed at the Rainbow Bridge in a suicide type of crash exactly 2 times 30 years or 60 years after the 60s assassination of JFK in the Ford, the first of 4 political assassinations in the Ford in between the 4 suicide doors. Stunning. Yeah. That connection connects us. So I'll put it in reverse. Kennedy was shot in the head between the 4 suicide doors in the Ford exactly 2 times 30 years before the suicide car crash at the $4 million bridge. that has 4 lanes. Yeah. And again, the reason why Kennedy was the youngest president shot in the head, because it hints at the rejuvenation that the demons will promise through the mark of the Antichrist, and then those who take it will be demonically possessed through their heads, through their brains, facilitated by Delta, the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet, brain waves. All right, so we've said a lot of information, and yet we've only gotten through not even the first paragraph here. Now, so Bible prophecy says those who, well, sorry, what I mean is the first paragraph of the second part, actually. It's a second, okay, anyway. Bible prophecy says that those who take the mark of the Antichrist will wish to commit suicide, but will be unable to. All right, so that's why we have the suicide doors connection to the suicide crash at the $4 million Rainbow Bridge with 4 lanes. The first of 4 major political assassinations that occurred between 4 suicide doors occurred exactly 4T plus 4T plus 4T weeks after the birth of the 44th president. I don't know why I wrote it this way. Obviously, it should be written as the birth of the 44th president. That's something else incidentally. That's amazing too, right? Because now we have the 44th president connecting with 4T plus 4T plus 4T weeks exactly to the death and shot in the head, as in 4th letter Delta brainwaves, of the president in between 4 suicide doors in the forward, and that's 2 times 30 years, which is 23, the number that the 44th president wore in high school basketball, to the suicide crash at the $4 million bridge with 4 lanes. And again, it's in this same prophecy in which the bottomless pit is opened and the demons cross through the door that speaks of this period of time in which people will not be able to commit suicide and wish to. That's alluding to the demonic possession. These people will want to commit suicide when they become demonically possessed, but will be unable to. So, in other words, suicide is part of the prophecy. It's not just because it's a coincidence that JFK is in between suicide doors connecting to the suicide car crash. It's part of the prophecy in the book of Revelation, chapter 9. Which, by the way, is the 5th trumpet judgment. And the period of time that it is said that people will wish to commit suicide and not be able to is said to be 5 months. And the demonic possession will be facilitated through the brainwaves that will be triggered by 5G frequencies. Okay. The first of 4 major political assassinations that occurred in between 4 suicide doors in the Ford on November 22nd, 1963, was exactly 3,202 weeks before the stock market sign on 4/4 that I have explained, that hinted at Genesis 3:22. The stock market sign with its loss of 322 points. Can you believe it? And I really don't like to use that phrase. I'm trying to eliminate it from my vocabulary because I'm a believer. But it's like a euphemism, right? It's hard to get rid of. But anyway, you get my point. It's just amazing. from this assassination of JFK, the youngest president, incidentally, which again hints at Genesis 3:22 and the promise of immortality. This assassination, the first of 4 political assassinations in between the 4 suicide doors in the Ford, connects with 3,202 weeks to the loss of 322 points, 0.44 points on the date 4/4. And it hints, of course, at Genesis 3:22. And the coming promise after the demons cross through the door, which is symbolized by the number 4. The stock market sign on 4/4 was 44 days before, and by the way, the stock market sign was a loss of 322.44. This sign on 4/4 was 44 days before the official inauguration of the 4th Pope this century, whose name, Robert Prevost, is equal to the 44th prime number in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. This was also the day that the 4th inaugurated president announced he had cancer in his bones, which produces blood. And so in other words, it's blood disease, which is what the mark of the Antichrist causes. This particular president is the second Catholic president. JFK was the first Catholic president, the first of 4 assassinated presidents in between the 4 political assassinations in between the 4 suicide doors in the Ford, was the first Catholic president. Okay, in other words, again, what we have here, picture this. From the death of the first Catholic president, the youngest president, we have in between the 4 suicide doors in the Ford, we have exactly 3,202 weeks to the stock market loss of 322.44 on the date 4/4. And it's 322.44, and it's 44 days before the inauguration of the 4th Pope this century, a Catholic Pope, whose name is equal to the 44th prime number. This was the same day of the news of the Catholic president, Biden, the other Catholic president other than JFK. And his news hinted at the mark of the Antichrist. Furthermore, Biden presided over the compelling of people to take the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, now, so the first Catholic president was the youngest elected president. Joe Biden, the second Catholic president, and the oldest serving president. That's the other parallel there, right? It's the youngest and oldest and first and second Catholic presidents. And by the way, it was Old Testament prophecy is more than clear that a pope would be the Antichrist. That's clear as day in Revelation chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. In other words, Catholicism is the reason why the Antichrist is the Catholic Pope. It's not because he's a particularly bad pope. It's because Catholicism is pagan religion. The thing that God hates most is false religious worship. That's clear in the Bible. The Jews were constantly chastised for it and then ultimately exiled twice for this. All right? For mixing their true religion with the religion of their pagan neighbors. That's the definition of Catholicism. It's Christianity mixed with pagan religion. When Rome converted to Catholicism, it didn't do away with its pagan traditions, such as the fertility goddess worship, which is what the worship of Mary is. It just repackaged them. In other words, it's pagan religion repackaged to make it look like Christianity. And if you think about it, Satan, which is the word in Hebrew for adversary, his job is to fool people And when faced with the gospel, what is one of the strategies he would employ? Obviously, one of the strategies would be to design something that looks like Christianity but isn't. Now, I'm not saying God hates Catholics, okay? Relax if you are a Catholic. I'm trying to help you. And I'm not saying Catholics won't make it to the kingdom. But if they do, it'll be in spite of their Catholicism, not because of it. But the vast majority of quote-unquote Protestant Christians are not on the path yet, and likewise is the case with most Catholics. But that's the purpose of the end times and the Antichrist, is to shake these people awake. And for one thing, in the case of Catholicism, compel these Catholics to finally make a decision. Do you want to continue with your pagan religion, or do you want to and follow the Antichrist Pope, or are you finally going to leave this denomination, which is not a legitimate denomination of Christianity? Now, so back to what I was saying. And by the way, what I said at the beginning holds true here. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. All of what I have said is proven through God's prophetic signs, but also prophecy. But I'm proving the prophecy through the prophetic signs and through this prediction. And make no mistake, I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. It is to prove what I have just said. It is case closed. You need to leave Catholicism. Stop it with the superstition and the things that the Bible says to not do. Jesus forbid, for example, repetitious prayers. Catholics are always repeating repetitious prayers. Jesus said that those that do that worship like pagans. Catholics are pagans. And on and on and on, all right? But it's worse than that. When you worship Mary and the saints, the so-called saints, you are in fact worshiping demons. And on and on. I could go with, I'm not going to make this video about the countless errors within Catholicism. Wake up. Listen to your Protestant friends. They're trying to help you. You are committing many, many errors that are not agreeable. You can't do those things. You can't confess your sins in a box to a man and then do them again, for example. Okay? Now, okay, so we've got the youngest president and the oldest president, the first and second Catholic presidents. That's symbolism for what's coming, which is the demonic realm opening up and the promise of immortality, right? That's the reason for this astounding connection between the death of JFK. Again, 3,222 weeks before the loss of 322 points. 0.44 on the date 44, 44 days before the Catholic Pope, the fourth one, and the fourth inaugurated president, the second Catholic president. Okay. You understand what I'm saying, I'm sure. Now, so the day that Joe Biden announced he had the bone cancer, which is symbolic of blood disease, which is what one gets from taking the mark of the Antichrist. Joe Biden was the fourth inaugurated president this century. He was also the former vice president of the 44th president, and he announced this on the same day of the official inauguration of the fourth pope this century. All right? And, okay. And his name is equal to 44, the 44th prime number. Now, the inauguration of the fourth pope this century and the announcement of the cancer for the fourth inaugurated president this century was on May 18th, 2025. The Vatican is symbolized by keys. The name Scheffler means bailiff, and bailiffs are known for their keys to prison cells, which is symbolism for hell, and the bottomless pit that will be opened with a key, as it says in Revelation chapter 9. It says that the bottomless pit will be opened with a key. That's why the symbol for the Vatican is keys. But on this same day of the official inauguration at the Vatican and the second Catholic president having cancer, etc., that same day, Scott Scheffler, which means bailiff, the name means bailiff, which hints at keys, because that's what bailiffs are known for. And the keys are to prison cells furthermore, and that's what the pit is, okay? He won the PGA tournament on this day. On the same day as the inauguration at the Vatican, on May 18th, Scott Scheffler won the PGA Championship golf tournament. He won his third major tournament, and this tournament is known for the fiasco in the third round when the golfers were forced to tee off in groups of three. That was why it was a fiasco, because they were forced to tee off in groups of three in the third round. And then the main headline after Scheffler won was that he had won the third major of his career. May 18th is 22 days before the predicted signs on June 9th that will symbolize the key opening the bottomless pit in Revelation 9, as I've mentioned, the bunker busters in Iran. So let's rephrase that here. Scheffler's third major win is 22 days to the date 6-9, right? This date. That's a hint at Genesis 3:22. And Scheffler means keys, and it is the key that opened the bottomless pit to the demons who will promise the immortality, which is symbolized by Genesis 3:22. But not only that. From the stock market loss of 322.44 on the date 4/4, it is 44 days to this third major win, which is 22 days to Genesis 3:22 day. Like I'm saying, it'll be symbolism, right? For the day that's coming in the fourth month of 2029. So in other words, the stock market loss of 322 connects with this third major and 22 days connection. But in turn, like I said, the stock market loss of 322 connected with 3,202 weeks to the shot in the head of the president. In between the suicide doors, in the Ford. That's why 322.44 points. 44 days before the third major, which is 22 days before Genesis 3:22 day. It's all amazing. Do you see? All you now need to know is that this video is being produced prior to June 9th. I mean, no one could possibly even fathom no one is even remotely creative enough to connect all of these things like I just have. Obviously, this is all from God, or it's a big coincidence. But when June 9th comes and the prediction comes to pass, it means this is from God. I'd have to be a pretty creative person, though, to create all of this. It's not possible. No one is creative enough. No one. And so, in other words, the prediction will come to pass. All right? But you just now need to know, if you are someone who relies heavily on their left brain, whether you are an agnostic atheist or even a Christian that doesn't believe in this sort of thing because you rely too much on your your left hemisphere of your brain, I recommend that you retrain your brain to think differently. Because this is, in a way, the main or big reason, a big reason why Western civilization is collapsing as we speak, is because it is, through its culture, the left brain is emphasized, and the left brain is completely dominating the right brain in Western people. Which is why Western people, one big reason they can't believe in God, or rather they refuse not to. It's because they have no wisdom. You need to have a balance between the two hemispheres And it is the right brain, the right side of the brain, that provides the abstraction and wisdom that goes complementary to the analytical left side of the brain. And in the Bible, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. This is connected. It's part of the reason why there is no wisdom in the typical Westerner today. The Western culture has no wisdom, and neither do people on the left that are, and it's by far the left, the political left is by far more addicted to their left brain than people on the right. I mean, they are severely disabled mentally because they are too heavily reliant on their left side of their brain, people on the political left. There is more consequences to this than what I'm explaining here. I recommend searching out on YouTube a gentleman, professor named Ian McGilchrist, who talks about this concept of the right versus left brain. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is that if you are so heavily reliant on your left brain that you can't see that what I've explained so far is not possible to have been concocted on my own, then okay, wait for the prediction comes to pass and then reassess your life completely. For one thing, politics is downstream from one's worldview. You're going to hopefully reassess your worldview, first of all. The God of the Bible is the true God. That also applies not just to the agnostic atheists, but the New Agers, the yoga practitioners, the meditators, the Eastern religionists, whatever you want to call it. In fact, the truth is the majority of people worldwide today, not even just in the West, when asked if they believe in a God, they don't say no. Actually, atheists or agnostic atheists are a minority. The vast majority will say yes, but not like the God of the Bible. In other words, what they mean is that, although most don't think about it, but even those that do think about it, this is what they mean. What they mean is that God, so-called, is more like the God of the Eastern religions, which is an impersonal energy, not a personal being to whom one is responsible to. That for them is icky. They do not like that idea at all. They want to be independent of God, and that is the original sin in the Bible. And so they tell themselves this foolishness of God being an impersonal energy and is the universe itself. And even the Big Bang disproves that. We now know there's a beginning, and to be the universe itself, the Hindu religion is that the universe is static, it always was, but we know now that that's not the case. The word holy is Hebrew for separate from, set apart. God is holy because he isn't the creation itself. He created the creation. He is a personal being outside of the universe. All right. Now, and God can't be both. There are many people that are also confused, who do not think clearly, and they've mixed Christian ideas with their New Age or consciousness, religion, spirituality stuff. Many people have mixed Christian ideas, and so they think that they can have a conversation with a Christian on the same level, but they lie to themselves. They mix, again, their certain Christian ideas, and they don't think clearly. But anyway, God can't be both. He can't be both monotheistic, a personal being, and pantheistic, the universe itself, an impersonal energy. Either the world is round or it's flat. It can't be both. And there are, of course, many people that think the world is flat these days. But the world cannot be both. The foundation of philosophy of logic is A cannot equal not A. That's the basics of logic. So God is either monotheistic, pantheistic, or doesn't exist, but he cannot be both. And not only have I proved monotheism, but I've proved Christianity. The righteous Christian God of the Bible is being proven with this prediction. Okay? If you are a Muslim, for example, it's time to stop it. You've had plenty of opportunity to open your mind and look into the evidence for Christ, and it is overwhelming if you become open-minded at some point. But due to pride, tribalism, if you're born into the Muslim family or the Muslim culture, I do not relate to that. The same way I do not relate to someone who is supposedly born Catholic and therefore is Catholic. What in the world is that all about? You're born into a particular culture and that's what the truth is? Well, lucky you. You won the jackpot. You got born into the correct truth about life without even thinking about it. You need to think about what is true. You need to decide for yourself. And if you don't, and you go with your family traditions, it's a form of pride, which in the Bible is the root of sin. You will pay the consequence for that form of pride. All right. The Vatican is symbolized by keys. The name Scheffler means bailiff. Did we already? Yeah, we already went through this paragraph. Okay. The fourth Catholic Pope this century, whose name is equal to the 44th prime number, was inaugurated 1 year, 1 month, and 22 days after the date 326 and the collapse of the Baltimore Bridge in Maryland, the historically Catholic state. The first Catholic president and the first of 4 assassinations in between the 4 suicide doors in the Ford was assassinated on the date 11/22, which is what 1 year, 1 month, and 22 days hints at. This date that Kennedy was assassinated on was the 326th day of the calendar year, which is why the bridge collapsed on the date 326. 1 year, 1 month, and 22 days before this inauguration of the Catholic Pope on the day that the Catholic president, the oldest one, announced his cancer, his bone cancer, symbolic of blood disease and the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, and again, it's relevant, this bridge. I explained earlier how the shooting of Kennedy in the car connected with the suicide crash at the bridge, the Rainbow Bridge, the $4 million bridge. This is a connection to the bridge in Maryland, as in Maryland, the historically Catholic state. Okay, did you get that though? All right. So hopefully I've explained it twice now, actually. Okay, so this 1 year, 1 month, and 22 days connection to the date 326 hints at the assassination of the first Catholic president on the date 11/22, the 326th day of the year. The symbol of the Vatican is keys, and the inauguration of the Pope at the Vatican was the same day that Scott Scheffler, as in bailiff and keys, won the PGA Championship. The new Pope replaced Pope Francis. The new Pope's name is Robert Francis Prevost. The name of the bridge that collapsed in Baltimore, in Maryland, was Francis Scott Key Bridge, as in Scott Scheffler and Robert Francis and Pope Francis. And it's Key Bridge, Francis Scott Key. The golfer's name is essentially Scott Key, and he won the PGA on the day of the inauguration of Robert Francis, who replaced Pope Francis. Again, Francis Scott Key Bridge. Now, Francis Scott Key, this is just coming to me right now. Francis Scott Key is the gentleman who authored the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. That national anthem, when he wrote it, is known for not having music put to it. Francis Scott Key did not write the music to the lyrics of the song. That's one of the things that the anthem is known for. Its lack of music, originally. The music was added later. It was an old English hymn that was added to it, the music. So, music is frequencies. It's frequencies in the air. It is 5G frequencies that will facilitate the demonic possession of people's brains. The bridge, in other words, really, between the demonic realm and the earthly realm is people's brains. That's what we're getting at, really. That's the bridge. And by the way, the center part of the brain is named pons, P-O-N-S, which is Latin for bridge. God demonstrated this with the ship that hit the Pons Bridge in 2024, around the time of the Baltimore Bridge. Now, so, that's how God's signs works. He teaches things, right? The bridge, really, ultimately, the bridge between the demonic realm and the earthly realm is the brains that have been altered with the mark of the Antichrist that will trigger the demonic possession. Okay? And it's 5G frequencies, and this demonic possession is alluded to in the fifth trumpet judgment. And that's why Scott Scheffler, the big story when he won the tournament, is how he blew away the competition by winning by 5 strokes. The next competitor, the second place finisher, was 5 strokes behind Scott Scheffler. Because it's frequencies and 5G frequencies, and that's why Francis Scott Key Bridge, which was the anthem that didn't have music to it. Of course, the national anthem is symbolic of the nation, and this is judgment on the nation. America is God's Gentile nation, which he is primarily focused on in this process of judgment. Because a person's judgment and a nation's judgment is commensurate with the amount of light and blessings it or they received. And of course, America was blessed like no other nation in history. So, okay. Now, next paragraph. The mark of the Antichrist causes cancer. In Bible prophecy, 42 months symbolizes the period of the Antichrist. Joe Robinette Biden was born in 1942. He announced he has colon cancer 42 months after he had a colonoscopy on the date November 19th, which since at Revelation 9:11, and the the bottomless pit opened up, and the date 11/19 leaves 42 days remaining in the year. Okay, I'll repeat that. Biden was born in 42. He announced, the big announcement that Biden made was 42 months, which is prophetic in Bible prophecy of the Antichrist, after he had a colonoscopy on this date, which left 42 days remaining in the year. All of this serves as second, third, and multiple witnesses confirming the relevance of the number 42 here for what I'm about to explain. So in other words, we have this background establishment of the relevance of 42 and Biden's announcement on May 18th. Now, on the day that Biden had his colonoscopy, Kamala Harris became the first black woman president. it is predicted that Michelle Robinson Obama, that's her maiden name, will become the first elected black woman president, inaugurated on January 20th, 2029, which will be the 42nd super semi-prime number of days after Joe Robinette Biden's announcement regarding colon cancer. The 42nd super semi-prime number of days is equal to 192 weeks exactly, and the name Obama is equal to 192 in English gematria. Okay, so God uses, first of all, prime numbers, but these prime numbers can be reduced in forms of super prime numbers. So the 42nd super prime semi-prime number, and God also uses semi-prime numbers, by the way, equally, as well as prime numbers. And a semi-prime number is a number that is only divisible by two other prime numbers. Okay, so the 42nd super semi-prime number of days connects Joe Robinette Biden's announcement. And again, he was born in 42. It was 42 months after the first black woman, after his colonoscopy. He announced he had colon cancer, all right? And that day that he had the colonoscopy was 42 days remaining in the year, which serves to confirm the 42nd super semi-prime number of days from going forward from his announcement to Michelle Robinson Obama becoming the president, the first black woman president, which is why it connects to the first black woman president for a few minutes while Biden had his colonoscopy. So you see, that's a beautiful thing. It's a confirmation that Michelle Obama will become the president in 2029. After which she will step down and Barack Obama, her vice president, will become the president. Joe Robinette Biden announced he has colon cancer, and Scott Scheffler won the PGA on May 18th. Robinson is a Scottish name. The names Scott Scheffler and Francis Scott Key Bridge hint at Michelle's maiden name, the Scottish name Robinson. 4 + 4 + 4 months prior to Scott's win of the PGA, Scott was charged with 4 crimes at last year's PGA in the early morning before then playing a round of golf and tying for 4th place at the end of the round. This day was the day the Dow closed above 40,000 for the first time, and this was 40 days after the path of totality of the eclipse over America passed over 7 cities named Nineveh. Prior to this day in which the Dow closed above 40,000 for the first time, I predicted that it would do so on this day because it was 40 days after the eclipse that went over 7 cities named Nineveh. And that's because the prophet Jonah preached repentance for 40 days in Nineveh. Unfortunately, I didn't recognize this prediction until the day before, but it should have and could have been known even before the eclipse, actually. Well, anyway, even though Scott had been charged with crimes in the morning, Scott ended up scoring 5 under par that day after playing 18 holes of golf. 4 crimes before scoring 5 under par after 18 holes hints at 4 + 4 + 4 months later and the date 518, right? Under 5 under par, 18 holes, the date 518, which is 4 + 4 + 4 months after Scott's 4 crimes when he did the 5 under par and 18 holes. Also, the story of this year's PGA is how Scott blew away the competition by 5 strokes, specifically Jon Rahm, who is from Scottsdale. Scott won the PGA on the day that the fourth Catholic Pope of the century was inaugurated, on the day that the Catholic fourth president to be inaugurated this century, Joe Robinette Biden, announced he has cancer. This was 4 days after it was announced that singer Smokey Robinson had been indicted for sexual assault. One of the three big hits that Smokey Robinson had with the Miracles was Mickey's Monkey. Mickey's Monkey reached number 4+4 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Revelation chapter 4x4 describes the monkeypox that people who will take the mark of the Antichrist will get, or have taken the mark of the Antichrist will get. Michelle is feminine for the name Michael, for which the name Mickey is a nickname. Mickey's Monkey reached number 4+4, and Michelle's husband, the 44th president, will become the president again after Michelle will step down from being the president. 4+4+4 days after Smokey Robinson, as in Michelle Robinson, the singer of Mickey's Monkey, was indicted, the former vice president of the 44th president announced he has cancer. This was the day that Scott won his third tournament. This was exactly 3 years after the first case of monkeypox was announced by the World Health Organization. That's amazing. We had all this tie to the date 5/18, which was actually the three-year anniversary of the first monkeypox case in that particular outbreak. The big one in 2022 on the date 5/18. By the way, 5/18 hints at 5 times 18, which is equal to 90. And 9 pairs the number 44. The 44th president was inaugurated in 09. God pairs these numbers to confirm the signs and connections. And so from the date that hints at the number 9, it was 4+4 days after Smokey Robinson, who sang Mickey's Monkey, which again hints at the 40, and that song reached number 4+4, and that hints at Michelle's monkey is Barack Obama, the 44th president. And I don't mean that as a racial slur, by the way. It's just what God is presenting here. All right? And so that's also why the monkeypox is alluded to in the 4x4 chapter of the book of Revelation. It says the people will get the big sores on them. That's what monkeypox is. So, and Smokey Robinson is connected to Michelle Robinson and Joe Robinette, who announced on the date 5/18, the anniversary of monkeypox. Now, another song that the Miracles, which is also prophetic in itself, that name, the Miracles, Mickey's Monkey, right? Let's see, is there something there with the MMM? Well, anyway, they are also known for the song, You Really Got a Hold on Me. I think that's their most known song. You Really Got a Hold on Me. And that's, of course, an allusion to the demonic possession of people who have taken the mark that will give them monkeypox. The demons will really have a hold on these people. Satan really has a hold on these people. To become free, They need to be saved by the Savior, God who became a man and defeated death and Satan's power over us, which is death. H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word "whoa!" exclamation mark. Smokey Robinson was charged with sexual assault 18 months and 8 days, as in "whoa!" exclamation mark, after Matthew Perry died on October 28th, 2023. In other words, God used this Smokey Robinson sign to tie in the signs that I'm about to explain involving Matthew Perry. And why that's relevant, I'll explain. But Smokey Robinson's indictment was a step that tied it all together. Perry was found drowned in his hot tub. This was at the same time that the shooter in Maine was found dead next to the Penobscot River. They also at one point searched for him using a submersible in some kind of pond or lake. And that's also why this Penobscot River in Maine is the location in the movie The Hunt for Red October, in which the submarine is hiding at the end of the movie. That's why the shooter was searched for with a submersible, and he was found near the Penobscot River. Okay, the same river as the submarine was hiding in the movie at the end. This movie starred Sean Connery, who was known for being a proud Scot. I mean, literally, one of the things he was known for was speaking out regarding his pride in being a Scot and Scotland. The name of the shooter, and by the way, God is using mass shootings in his signs to symbolize the thing, the mark of the Antichrist. The things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolic of the things that come out of things and go into people. The mass shootings are symbolic of the mass taking of the mark of the Antichrist. The name of the shooter, by the way, the shooting took place in let me see. Yeah, I say that in a minute. Okay. The name of the shooter was Robert. Okay, so he was found at the time that Matthew Perry died, and he was found dead after the manhunt. And his name was Robert Card. Okay, so his name is Robert. And Matthew Perry's first role in TV and his first role in a movie was playing characters whose names were Robert. Perry died on the birthday of Julia Roberts, whom he had dated. The name Robert is Scottish, and its origin is the same etymology as Robinson. In other words, Robert and Robertson is essentially the same name as Robinson. And this is a Scottish name. That's why the Penobscot River and Sean Connery, the proud Scot, tied to all of this. Okay. The mass shootings are symbolic of the SHOTs that are the mark of the Antichrist. Robert Card shot 18 and killed 18 and injured 13 in the 23rd state, Maine. The mark of the Antichrist is described in Revelation 13:18, and the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. That's amazing. 13 injured, 18 killed, Revelation 13:18. Because mass shootings are symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. That changes the 23 pairs of chromosomes, and that's why the 23rd state. Perry's last social media post included the moon and his statement, "I'm Matman." "I'm Matman" and "I'm vaccinated" have the same gematria value. Perry died from a HEART attack after taking the thing, which is what those who take the mark of the Antichrist thing often die of. So Perry is known for taking a thing for his ketamine, right? But that's symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which is also a thing that is used to put things inside people. And the mark of the Antichrist often gives people a HEART attack, and that's what Perry died of. On the day that Perry died, and again, his last social media post is a parallel with the mark of the Antichrist, and he died, and in that post was a shot of him of the moon. Oh, it was a shot. There was a shot of him with under the moon in his hot tub. Wow. On the day that Perry died, a blood moon lunar eclipse that was best viewed in Maine, literally the best place to see it in the continental US was Maine, and that was where the shooter, Robert Card, was found dead. It was the Hunter moon. Joe Robinette Biden has an infamous son named Hunter, and he announced that he has cancer 18 months and 8 days after this Hunter moon prophetic eclipse. There's more to the moon here, actually, because the day that Joe Robinette Biden with his son named Hunter announced he has cancer, bone cancer as in blood, was the day that the moon was 69%, and it was the same day that the Pope was inaugurated, and he is 69 years old. And I've explained countless times already how the fourth inaugurated president this century is a parallel or connects with the fourth Pope this century. So anyway, the 18 months and 8 days again hits at H188 and whoa, exclamation mark. Okay, so again, Smokey Robinson's indictment, 4 plus 4 days to Joe Biden, and 18 months and 8 days to Matthew Perry. Okay. The mass shooting that pointed to Revelation 13:18 occurred in Lewiston, Maine. Lewiston hints at Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, which is known for Alice's body changing in order to pass through portal doors to Wonderland, which is symbolism for the changing of people's chromosomes and them becoming demonically possessed by demons after they pass through the portal door from the demonic realm. You see how that's beautiful symbolism? This is why God has used this theme of Alice in Wonderland in a number of ways in his signs, all right? That's because the story is most known for her changing, her morphing into different sizes of Alice in order to pass through portal doors into other dimensions. The demons will pass from the demonic dimension through a portal door and will demonically possess people after they change their body with the mark of the Antichrist, after they are promised immortality and age reversal. You see? Now, the fifth trumpet judgment in the book of Revelation alludes to this coming mass demonic possession that will be triggered by 5G frequencies. This is why 18 months and 8 days after Matthew Perry's death and the discovery of the Lewiston mass shooter, Scott Scheffler blew away the competition by 5 strokes. Well, actually, the 18 months and 8 days again connects to Smokey Robinson, which then connects to Joe Robinette, Biden, and Scott Scheffler when he won by 5 strokes. In the 5th trumpet judgment, the portal door to the demonic realm is opened with a key. Alice used a key, Alice in Wonderland. In Alice in Wonderland, Alice used a key, a golden key, to open the door to Wonderland, and the name Scheffler hints at keys. Scheffler won by 5 strokes on the day of the inauguration at the Vatican, and the symbol of the Vatican is keys. During the controversial 3rd round of the tournament, players were forced to tee off in groups of 3. This was also the day that Jon Rahm, who is from Scottsdale, hit a player on the head with a golf ball during play. Rahm, who has won 22 tournaments in his career. Rahm has won 22 tournaments in his career. All right, and so the fiasco, the day that he hit the guy in the head, was during the 3rd round, which was a fiasco because players were forced into groups of 3, and he has won 22 tournaments. That hints at Genesis 3:22. Scheffler won his 3rd tournament and beat this guy Rahm 22 days before the predicted sign that symbolizes the opening of, with a key, the bottomless pit, to the demonic realm. Scheffler won the tournament on the day that an NHL referee was hit in the head by a hockey stick during a playoff game. He bled profusely onto the ice and was taken to the hospital. These 2 signs involving being hit in the head hint at how 5G frequencies will induce brain waves that will trigger demonic possession. Again, Scheffler won by 5 strokes. The name of the player whose stick slashed the face of the referee. And so before I continue, again, this also aligns with the theme that I was talking about, which is how the demonic possession will come through people's heads with the 5G frequencies, with their brains, and the delta brain waves, which is again the reason, as I explained, the connection from the youngest president who was shot in the head in the Ford, the first of 4 political assassinations between the 4 suicide doors, exactly 2 times 30 years before the suicide crash at the $4 million bridge that has 4 lanes. So that's all because the demons will cross the bridge, which is really the person's brain that will be demonically possessed. And that's why Kennedy was shot. He was the youngest president, but that's because of the age reversal that will be promised with the SHOT. And that's why he was shot in the head. So back to this sign here, we have more shot in the head symbolism, because we had the infamous hit of the spectator in the head during the tournament by the guy from Scottsdale, as in Scott Scheffler, right? But also it was during the 3rd round, and he has won 22 tournaments. And Scott Scheffler won the 3rd major of his career 22 days before June 9th, the date that pits are predicted to be opened in Iran, Persia. All right, now, more drilling down into the details of this particular sign, that's hockey referee sign. The name of the player whose stick slashed the face of the referee is Nico, which is amazing because this is this theme in which many people whose names hint at Nick, God has used to point to the Nicolaitan doctrine. This hints at the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war on with the sword of his mouth. On those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. The Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is one of the many reasons. Is one of the main reasons why many quote unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist. It is judgment on them for their Nicolaitan doctrine, which God has overwhelmingly identified in his big picture of signs as precisely being, and again, I know better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction. It is to prove what I am about to say. It is a fact. It is case closed. No, zero at all debate. The Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is free grace and cheap grace, which comes in the package of dispensationalism. And so, in other words, those Christians that think that the mark couldn't possibly be the mark because not all quote-unquote Christians have been raptured yet, it is judgment for you for this particular doctrine, which is related to your free grace. Once saved, always saved, which is the close cousin of sovereign grace, which is also the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, which comes in the package of Calvinism, Reformed theology. This is the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Because the truth is, the root of the bad tree that's producing the bad fruit is this doctrine. Once saved, always saved. Our righteousness is as filthy rags. One verse that Luther took out of context and twisted to support his entire theology. Luther was an Augustinian monk. Calvin disparaged the other early church fathers and only quoted Augustine. Augustine corrupted the church in the 5th century with his latter writings. His first writings are all right, but his latter writings, he brought in his Manichaean Gnosticism. He was an official auditor in the Manichaean sect for 9 years before he joined the Catholic Church. And it's Gnosticism. And John, the Apostle John in the Bible, called the Gnostics Antichrist. If you want, the Reformed theologists, the sovereign grace, free grace people, are Antichrist. They're the descendants of Gnosticism, which incidentally is the belief that one attains a certain knowledge and then they are saved, if you will. They are released from this realm, this world. Well, it's the same with the Calvinists. For them, one needs to have the correct intellectual doctrine in order to be saved, which is absurd. A relationship, a loving, faith-based, obedient relationship with Christ has nothing to do with intellectually agreeing with the precise, correct doctrine. One does not get saved by believing in Calvinism, in other words. If that were the case, furthermore, heaven is going to be filled with a bunch of white men. Right? Because think about it. It's the men that are into doctrine largely, and it is white men largely. It's absurd. It's absurd. James said regarding this saved by faith alone theology, which is the excuse for the doctrine, for the teachings and works that are a product of the doctrine, saved by faith alone. And that's why the evangelicals have a phobia when it comes to works, because they believe that if they question their doctrine, saved by faith alone, then they won't be saved. That's how satanic it is. That's the strategy Satan employs in all cults. Questioning the credo of the cult means that you're not saved. This applies to the Jehovah's Witnesses and everyone else too. But it applies to the evangelicals and their cult of once saved, always saved, and saved by faith alone. And that's why they are squirming in their seats when they hear something like this, because they're afraid of it. If you do not believe the correct, precise doctrine, you're not saved. But that has nothing to do, for one thing, with the Apostles' Creed. Now, James said, for example, you see, a person is not saved by faith alone, but by his works. And that's the only place in the Bible where the phrase saved by faith alone occurs. In other words, James was dealing with this same thing in his day. The Gnostics, the Christian Gnostics, saved by faith alone. And where is this all rooted in? It's rooted in the teachings of Paul. Because the evangelicals interpret the teachings of Jesus through the writings of Paul instead of the other way around. And they isolate and dissect fragments of passages that Paul wrote to prove their theology, even though even the writings of Paul contradict their theology in countless places. They don't interpret the Bible as a whole. They isolate fragments of passages to prove their theology. But that's why the very last warning of Peter was regarded those who, and warning of those who twist the writings of Paul to their own destruction, which is what the Nicolaitans of our day do. They twist the writings of Paul to their own destruction. Okay? Anyway, the prediction being made in this video will prove everything I'm saying. That's why the ref was hit in the face by the player named Nico. Now, there are the so-called quote-unquote pastors, that's another thing, that will tell you something to the effect that, well, we don't really know who the Nicolaitans were. We don't really know what Jesus was talking about, even though he mentioned it twice in the book of Revelation. And furthermore, the book of Revelation is more than anything for us in this specific time in history. Do you really think that Jesus would have it that we would not really understand what he was saying? Or is it that he was speaking of them? And that's why they can't recognize what Jesus was speaking about. Because the word Nicolaitan is a conjunctive word from Greek that means ruling over the laity. In other words, pastors and priests and reverends and bishops, etc. Jesus forbid teachers and forbid calling anyone your teacher. And he did that, and he also forbid the preaching of money, because he knew that this is exactly what would happen. You would have the institutionalization of these errors and 45,000 different denominations through the moneyed church, which would institutionalize these errors and pass them down from generation to generation. I mean, the egregious errors that are, for example, the Jehovah's Witness errors are not possible unless the money that cements it all, that institutionalizes, and the quote-unquote teachers the ones that, for this example, write the Watchtower magazine. The elders, there are elders. That's another subject. That's not what was meant by elders, though. When Peter talks about elders, for example, and Paul talks about elders. Anyway, so the point is that by definition, a denomination has some unique way of contradicting the teachings of Jesus. That's what makes it a denomination. That's what makes it unique. You have to have some way of contradicting the Bible and then passing it down through the money and the alpha males that step on stage for an hour and give a performance and get paid for it. All right. And by the way, they have a 100% monopoly on the information in order to pass down the errors and make sure that the errors are passed down. It's satanic. That's why Paul said, if someone is speaking in the group, talking about an assembly, a church, if someone is speaking and another one is inspired to say something, let the first person who is speaking be silent. When will you ever see that in a church? If you were to get up and say, you know what, Pastor, regarding what you just said, I have something to say, you would be immediately escorted out of the church and probably asked never to return. And that's because it's a socialist dictatorship, and just like political socialist countries, the citizenry become immature, which is why, in large part, the people that follow these quote-unquote pastors are largely immature. I'm just generalizing, of course, but that's the problem. Pastors are the problem. They are the Nicolaitans. That's what the word Nicolaitan means. And Jesus would not have used this word twice in this important context when he said he's coming to make war on them, and only to leave the meaning of it to be obscure. Also, I'll leave you with this too. The first warning that Jesus gave in the Olivet Discourse was of those who would come claiming to be Christ. The word Christ is meaning Messiah. It's the Greek for the Hebrew word Messiah, which means anointed one. And there are other anointed ones in the Bible other than Lord Jesus Christ. So when Jesus said there will be many Christs coming that will lead many people astray, he wasn't referring to many Lord Jesus Christs. Anyone who comes claiming to be Lord Jesus Christ is, of course, recognized by everyone as being mentally unsound, and furthermore have not led many people astray. But over the centuries, many pastors and priests and reverends and bishops have led many people astray. But now it is more dangerous than ever to be following a pastor or a priest. And that's why, again, the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist, because they've told themselves, well, my anointed one, my special anointed one by God would let my anointed one know if this thing is the mark of the Antichrist or not. So God is doing a work through these pastors, but it's a negative work. They don't realize it. By the way, they are also the masters of the house that Jesus said, had they known the hour that he was coming, would be prepared and not let the thief break in. The thief is Jesus, which is why if you go into one of these churches headed by a pastor and start talking about the timing of the Lord's return, you'll be immediately kicked out. In other words, there is no way I could go into a church and start talking about the things that I'm talking about, which is the thousands of prophetic signs that Jesus commanded his disciples to watch for. Why? Because the master of the house is preventing the thief from breaking in. And the thief is Jesus. Their so-called flocks do not belong to them. There is only one shepherd and one flock. They are not shepherds. They are hired hands. As Jesus said, the hired hand flees when the wolf comes. Because they do not have the interest. They are not interested. They are not his flock. They're just getting paid. They'll tell themselves otherwise, but it's all a lie. They're lying to themselves. They are the hired hands that Jesus was speaking about. And so, anyway, it is now more dangerous than ever to be following one of these so-called teachers. Get out of that. Find some people in your church that also agree and get together in your house like the early Christians did. Bridges are symbolic of the bridge or portal door that demons will cross over into the earthly realm. Revelation 13:18 regards the number of the Antichrist 666. Matthew Perry, who's again hints at Robert and Scottish, died on the night of the blood moon lunar eclipse over Maine when the manhunt ended for the shooter, Robert Card, who injured 13 and killed 18 people. This date was 6,000 times 6,000 times 6,000 minutes, or 3,600 hours, and 36 hints at 6 times 6. It also hints at 3 sixes. And it also hints at 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. Okay, so this day in which the manhunt ended and Matthew Perry died on the day of the blood moon lunar eclipse over Maine, and he killed or injured 13 and killed 18. Revelation 13 hints at 666, is about 666. And this date is 6,000 times 6,000 times 6,000 minutes, which is also 3,600 hours before the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. Again, that's relevant because Matthew Perry was hinting at Robert, which is a Scottish name. And, okay, so this was also, this was the collapse of the bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And it was the Penobscot River. Okay, so that's another Scott for you. Again, the manhunt ended next to the Penobscot River, and the Penobscot River is the river that the submarine was hiding at the end of the movie starring Sean Connery, who is a proud Scot. And again, it was all about Robert because of the Scottish name that hints at Michelle Robinson. All right. Well, anyway, so the Francis Scott Key Bridge in turn collapsed 4 times 4 days. And again, the number 4 is symbolic of the door or bridge between the demonic and earthly realms. Okay, it collapsed 4 times 4 days before the death of former San Francisco, as in Scott Francis Bridge, 49er football player O.J. Simpson, who was also born in San Francisco. This death of the 49er was 4 times 9 days, which is 36 days, which also again hits at 666. 4 times 9 days before Scott Scheffler was charged with 4 crimes, and 4 divided by 9 equals 0.44. This was 4 times 9 days before Scott Scheffler. I should say Scott Scheffler. I should say Scott Key. Scott Keys was charged with 4 crimes in the 15th state, exactly 415 months after the collapse of the I-80 bridge, which is 40 plus 40, in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay earthquake. The area code of San Francisco is 415. Scheffler's 4 crimes before tying for 4th place that day was 4 plus 4 plus 4 months before he won the PGA on the same day that the 4th Pope of the century replaced Pope Francis, as in San Francisco. And again, the Pope's name is Robert Francis. Robert also, by the way, ties with the Matthew Perry signs. And the Scott, because Robert is the Scottish name. That's why Scott Scheffler won the PGA on the day that Robert Francis was inaugurated. Okay, and he, again, was the 4th Pope of the century, whose name is equal to the 44th prime number. So in other words, I just tied in all of this connection here, the two more bridges, the I-40+40 bridge in San Francisco and the bridge in Maryland, another Catholic hint, all right, which was the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Okay, the Francis Scott Key Bridge ties to the bridge in San Francisco. Okay, you get it. It's amazing. Yep. Now, Joe Robinette Biden is the fourth inaugurated president this century and is the former vice president of the 44th president. On 9/11 in 2001, 44 people died in the plane that crashed 40+40 miles outside of Pittsburgh. The number 4 equals door to the bottomless pit, as in Pittsburgh. Biden was coincidentally in Pittsburgh on the day that the Fern Hollow Bridge collapsed. That's an amazing thing. He was there to promote his infrastructure package. Bridges are infrastructure. The bridge collapsed in the morning. He then, after his speech, went to the bridge. It was a Biden sign, in other words, this bridge sign, okay? Now, Biden announced he has cancer on the day that Scheffler, as in key to the bottomless pit, Revelation 9:11, won the PGA on Quail Hollow Club golf course. And the golf course, the name of it was relevant because of the fiasco during the third round, like I was talking about, in which the players were saying were commenting on the incompetency of the golf course, etc., or the organization. Well, anyway, Quail Hollow rhymes with Fern Hollow Bridge, right? Both are Biden signs. Now, let's see. Joe Robinette Biden visited the collapsed bridge in Pittsburgh exactly 91 weeks and 1 day, which hints at Revelation 9:11 and the bridge from the demonic realm in the pit. Okay, so Revelation 9:11, the pit and the bridge. That's why 91 weeks and 1 day, it hints at Revelation 9:11 from the bridge collapse in Pittsburgh. So it was 91 weeks and 1 day before Matthew Perry, as in Robert equals Robinson equals Robinette, died when Robert Card was found after the manhunt. This 91 weeks and 1 day from the collapsed bridge is also exactly 7 plus 7 plus 7 months. The Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed. Okay, so the bridge in Pittsburgh collapsed exactly 7 plus 7 plus 7 months before Matthew Perry died and the manhunt was ended for Robert Card. And the bridge collapsed in Pittsburgh, the bridge that collapsed in Pittsburgh was a replacement bridge for a bridge that was built 70 years prior to its replacement. The original bridge was built in 1903, which hints at 193, the 44th prime number. As in bridge, as in door, as in 44th president, as in Joe Biden, the vice president of the 44th president, as in Joe Biden, who was at the bridge on the day that it collapsed. When the bridge collapsed on the day that the former vice president for the 44th president was there was an evacuation of residents in the area due to a broken gas pipe, which was 4 times 4 inches wide. Scott Scheffler earned $3.4 million for winning the PGA Championship, which hints at 34, which is the 9th Fibonacci number. The number 9 is the most important number in God's signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. Scheffler, as in keys, because he's the bailiff, right, won $3.4 million, as in the 9th Fibonacci, on the day that the Vatican, as in keys, replaced Pope Francis, which was 9 plus 9 plus 9 days after Francis died. And by the way, that date, as I mentioned earlier, the date 518 hints at 5 times 18, which is 90, which also confirms the 9 plus 9 plus 9 days connection between that day and the day that Francis died. The word Pope is equal to 52 in simple English gematria. The Pope died exactly 52 months after Biden first took the mark of the Antichrist thing on December 21st, 2020, which was the day of the closest Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 400 years, which is symbolic of Egypt, because the Israelites escaped Egypt after being afflicted for 400 years. And the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that was the closest in 400 years was exactly 4 T months, as in the number 4, and the door symbolism, after the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse passed over a little Egypt in America and Cairo, Illinois, which was exactly 3,000 days, which is at Mount Sinai in the book of Exodus out of Egypt, because of the 3,000 that perished after their rebellion at Mount Sinai. Exactly 3,000 days, the eclipse went over Little Egypt in Cairo, Illinois. Exactly 3,000 days after the 44th president went to Cairo, Egypt, to deliver his famous speech in order to tell the Muslim world that America is no longer a Christian nation, because he's the Antichrist. Barack Obama, as a U.S. Senator, delivered a speech in Cairo, Illinois. Anyway, this 40 months connection followed by 3,000 days connection hints at 3.4, the amount that Scheffler won from winning the PGA. And again, this all connects to Scheffler's winning of the PGA. The Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, incidentally, Saturn is symbolic of the Antichrist, as is the king of Egypt, whom the Israelites escaped after 400 years. Saturn on its north pole has a 6-sided hexagonal shape, and Saturn hints at Satan. Scheffler beat Rahm, who has won 22 tournaments, and Scheffler's win over Rahm is 22 days before the predicted sign on June 9th that will symbolize the opening of the bottomless pit with a key. Scheffler means key. The number 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in the book of Ezekiel, which would have been a Tav mark. In an ancient Hebrew, the Tav was the last letter and the 22nd letter of the alphabet. And the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the 22nd out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes, they come in pairs, and each chromosome that's in the pair has 2 arms, and so 2 and 2, which is at 22. Now, 22 days is also 4 times 5.5 days. The word Satan is mentioned 55 times in the Bible. The name Satan is equal to 55 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Satan is referred to in Revelation 9:11 after he has emerged from the bottomless pit that will be opened with a key. The 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for door. The door to the bottomless pit will be opened with a key. So 4 times 55.5 hints at door times Satan. And it is in Revelation 9:11 that mentions the king of the bottomless pit, Satan, who has come through the door. So 4 times 5.5 days after Scheffler, whose name means keys, won by 5 strokes, which again was 4 plus 4 plus 4 months after he scored 5 under par after being charged with 4 crimes. And the inauguration at the Vatican of the 4th Pope this century and the bloodied head of the referee hints at adding 4 times 5.5 days to get the predicted opening of the pits in Iran with bombs. So let me repeat that without the paragraph. The door to the bottomless pit will be opened with a key. Okay, and out of it comes Satan, who's in Revelation 9:11, which is the 5th trumpet judgment. Satan is mentioned 55 times and is equal to 55 in gematria. So 4 as in door times 5.5 as in Satan. Days after Scheffler won by 5 strokes, and the day of the inauguration at the Vatican, which is symbolism for keys, as is the name Scheffler, of the 4th as in door, Pope of the century, and the bloodied head of the referee, hints at adding 4 times 5.5 days to get the predicted opening of the pits with Iran bombs in Iran, and which will symbolize the 5th trumpet judgment, which regards demons from the bottomless pit that will demonically possess people's heads through their head who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, and this will be triggered, facilitated through 5G frequency brainwaves. Scheffler won the 107th PGA Championship. The name Scheffler hints at the key that will open the bottomless pit to demons pretending to be aliens. 107 is the 4 times 7th prime number. The date that symbolizes Roswell symbolizes the Roswell alien UFO incident is the date 7-4, which outside the US is written as 4-7, in 47, in the 47th state. Okay? So that's what's hinted at with the 107th PGA Championship, because these demons that will emerge from the bottomless pit and promise immortality through the mark of the Antichrist, they will pretend to be aliens. They will pretend to be aliens with a fantastic transhumanist technology. Okay? So it's very relevant, this alien theme. Furthermore, Roswell, New Mexico is in Chavez County. Chavez is the Spanish word for keys. And Roswell is located near Bottomless Lakes State Park, as in the bottomless pit that's opened with a key. Okay, it's amazing. Now, on May 18th, Pope Leo XIV, the 4th Pope this century, was officially inaugurated. This is 1404 days before it is predicted the first of the 2 massive Mary apparitions will appear on the beach in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. That's a form of what we're talking about. The bottomless pit being opened and demons coming through, pretending to be Mary and demons. And that's because all Mary apparitions in all of history, including Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, etc., have all been demons pretending to be Mary. And who are they deceiving? The gullible, the Catholics that don't read the Bible, that don't know that their Catholic traditions, including their tradition of Mary, is not the Bible, because that's their tradition. Even in the tradition itself, it was forbidden for centuries to even read the Bible. And still to this day, as a result of that culture, it's passed on, and today still Catholics don't read the Bible. They're not interested, and that's why they receive the judgment and the deception. And furthermore, like I mentioned earlier, I think the worship of Mary is pagan religion. It's the same, it got carried over when Rome converted from the worship of the fertility goddesses, Isis, Ishtar, Aphrodite, etc. And so when you worship Mary, you worship demons. That's the truth. Now, the thing is that the thing about what the proof that all of these Mary apparitions have been demons is the quotes they say. You just need to read what these supposed Mary apparitions say. And if you know the gospel and you know the Bible, you will clearly recognize that who is speaking are demons. And they're deceiving. They're saying things that contradict the Bible. For example, Mary's upset because people aren't doing enough rosemary beads or sacraments. They need to take more pieces of the bread, etc. Well, I'll give you an anecdote. I once met a nice lady who I became friends with over the course of a short period, and she told me her story where, because she's Catholic, or hopefully she was Catholic after our conversation, I don't know. But she told me that she went into the cathedral with her friends or family once and witnessed the piece of bread that Catholics take for their salvation levitate off the table. There are only two explanations for this, because I believe it happened, and I have no reason to doubt that. So there's two explanations possible. One, an angel lifted the piece of bread off the table to encourage the Catholics to take more piece of bread for their salvation. Or two, it was a demon that lifted the piece of bread off the table to encourage Catholics to take more pieces of bread for their salvation. Because that's the truth. That's not the gospel. It's deception. It's a trick. Like I said, Satan's job is to trick people. One distraction is to convince people that they're good if they take pieces of bread for their salvation, and they need to keep doing more of it, which is antithetical to the Bible, which is that one is saved through their faith, but not like the Calvinists when they say faith. Faith is a doing. One lives out their faith, right? That's what James was talking about when he said what he said, because he gave the examples of Abraham and Rahab, who were sanctified through their works, which demonstrated their faith. Anyway, so the point though here is that the things that these Mary ghosts have supposedly said are obviously demons speaking. What's coming, though, is a massive Mary apparition in the 4th month of 2029 on the beach in Rio. There should be two of them, actually, a few days apart. And she will be a massive apparition the whole world will see. It will be mainstream news. All the news networks will cover it. It'll be not secretive like past demon Mary apparitions. And anyway, that's why Pope Leo the 14th, whose name equals 44 and is the 4th Pope this century, was inaugurated 1404 days before the predicted first of the Mary apparitions, which incidentally will be predicted to be on the date 322, which is at Genesis 3:22, which is what the demons will be here for, to promise age reversal and immortality without God. So Mary will be a part of that deception. Okay, so that's it for this video. God bless. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon, Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, A Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.